Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's trip to the United States highlights the crumbling political support for Ukraine in the West, which will prevent Kyiv from making significant advances on the battlefield in 2024. The Ukrainian president pleaded for more military aid in a speech at the National Defense University in Washington. Ukrainians haven't given up and won't give up. We know what to do and you can count on Ukraine, and we hope just as much to be able to count on you, Zelensky said. Despite Ukraine's failed counteroffensive, Zelensky is determined to continue the war, even as Ukraine's top general has said Ukrainian forces have little chance of breaking through Russian defenses, and Ukraine is facing a manpower shortage. The situation on the battlefield remains stagnant, while Western support has failed to break the stalemate and instead appears at risk of decline. As we approach the 2-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine, war fatigue is beginning to affect Western support for the war. Whilst Russia had a bad start to the war, it has now adapted, and the tide is on Russia's side now, who will try to gain more territory and then start negotiations from a position of strength. The U.S. Congress passed the $886 billion 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, which funds the Pentagon and other military spending. The new act extends Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows mass warrantless surveillance of Americans. The mammoth $886 billion budget is $28 billion more than what was approved last year. President Biden is seeking another $111 billion to fund military aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, on top of regular military spending. The new budget includes several amendments to fund the U.S. and allied military buildup in the Indo-Pacific that's aimed at China. One amendment allows the Pentagon to transfer 3 nuclear-powered Virginia-class submarines to Australia as part of a military pact the U.S., Britain, and Australia signed in 2021 to prepare for a future war with China. Despite the differences between the Democrats and Republicans, the defense budget always gets passed, because when this is broken down, it turns all U.S. states onto supply chain for the military and brings jobs and investments to U.S. states. This year's UN Climate Summit has ended with the signing of the first ever global agreement to reduce all fossil fuel consumption. In the final deal, over 200 countries agreed to begin transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, accelerating action in this critical decade so as to achieve net zero by 2050 in keeping with the science. While it does not include language regarding a phase-out of hydrocarbons, the final agreement is stronger than the previous draft text, which lacked any language referencing the need to reduce fossil fuel consumption. But despite this, the document contained a litany of loopholes, which did little to advance the key actions needed to stave off climate breakdown and deliver justice to islands and low-lying states facing the gravest consequences of the climate crisis. In addition, growing skepticism of climate science and the energy transition among far-right politicians in Western countries, particularly the U.S., will likely erode the impact of the COP28 agreement over time, especially if former U.S. President Donald Trump wins another term in 2024, which would likely lead to the United States again withdrawing from the Paris Agreement and climate talks.